Thank you so much, Amber. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to today's Social Business Applications webinar. Scott Rogers, who is a collaboration architect on the IBM Software Services team, is here today, and he will be showcasing the social business apps that can help you get the most out of your Connections environment. When his presentation is complete, that is when we'll open up the lines for your questions over the phone. So with that, I think we're ready to begin. Scott, whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, thank you, Karen, and good day, everyone. Thanks for taking time to talk with us about how to accelerate adoption with some of the social business applications that are available from IBM for IBM Connections. As Karen mentioned, my name is Scott Rogers. I'm a member of the IBM Software Services team. For nearly 21 years or so, I've been helping people to work smarter with IBM software, although some of the more astute of you will see that I'm still a victim of copy and paste errors when it comes to calendar entries. So my apologies if you thought you were joining a session that had to do with IBM same time. But in this session, we're going to discuss some of the application assets that help accelerate the adoption of the social platform, IBM Connections. First, let's talk about a scenario that I see quite often. The IBM Connections environment might be configured and the customer deployment team is ready for users to start collaborating within it. And one of the first steps is to ask users to complete their social profile, providing key details about themselves that might not be represented in the corporate white pages. Too often, however, instructions are not followed and reminders have to be sent out to those users, and that induces some additional completions, but really not enough. And this very small initial step, just getting the profile completed, can be dragged out over a long period of time with a really low completion rate. Now, to make adoption of the social platform successful, it's best to have a comprehensive change management, enablement, and support plan. And the social business apps I'll show you today are enablers within that larger strategy, but certainly aren't the only thing you should do. Now, the larger enterprise social software team has some comprehensive offerings on adoption, and members of the team have presented and published best practices in the past. For our talk today, I'd like to leverage some of the work done by Joyce Davis and Susie Livingston and Chris Cooper in our Connect 2014 event that happened in Orlando a couple years ago. I like this presentation because it discusses some common adoption myths and makes recommendations to address them. And I've extracted a few examples that balance and match against the apps that I'll show you in a few moments. Now, the first example, our first myth, is that even with intuitive user experiences, that the recommendation is that there's still a need for guidance and continual education. And I've highlighted in blue from the slide from the event some aspects of the social business apps that assist in user onboarding and additional education. And we'll see two apps examples that help address this myth and fulfill that recommendation. The second example stresses that although you may get early adopters to jump the gap and try something new, it's still important to entice the early majority by integrating into the systems they use every day. Place the new functionality in the places where the majority are working day to day and give them a path to the new platform. The next point is to avoid arbitrary silos in the people identified for pilots and deployment groups. You should stay flexible in who participates, allowing viral adoption and growth in overall usage. And a final point is that any education plan must provide more than just functional help. It really should give assistance in context and be assembled into best practices and guidance. So let's look at a different approach and take that adoption failure that I started with. So instead of just build it and see if they will come, one of our customers used a guided onboarding experience where new users were interviewed through a set of wizard-like screens. In this case, no emails asking users to perform an action were needed. It was an automated activity when they first logged into Connections. The results were such that a large number of users were onboarded and engaged with the platform in a very short period of time. We also provided some lightweight integration to expose key functions of IBM Connections into the working environment of the majority of users. By placing navigational aids and functional elements directly into an HR, CRM, ERP, intranet, extranet, any web application that's used day to day, we found that the users are more engaged, being able to consume the Connections features in the place that they work, or easily navigate to the full platform. Viral adoption is promoted by allowing users to invite others to participate in a self-service model. With IBM Connections version 5, there's the ability to have secure external collaboration. And by having assets that automatically provision invited participants and control the workflow around that, you provide self-service viral adoption. And in the area of educational materials, the use of sample video tutorials provide in-context details on functionality. And these same tutorials are then assembled into custom guidance and lessons plans on best practices, which ultimately avoid spikes in support calls during the rollout. So this adoption scenario provides just 4 examples from the IBM Social Business Applications program. The program consists of software services assets that are available worldwide to our customers using IBM Connections, or expertise solutions, or needing to migrate content and people. All the apps in the program have the full support of the IBM technical team or our business partners. And the services team is able to use the latest technology to deploy and customize solutions to fit specific customer needs. The goal of the program is to balance the maturity or complement the maturity of the IBM software products with the agility to enhance them to provide additional value to our clients. The current catalog is divided into accelerators for IBM Connections, and I'll describe the 4 blue items in greater detail. There are additional IBM and business product assets that comprise this category. We also offer advanced analytics capabilities to locate and manage expertise within an organization. We express expertise solutions in 2 default use cases, Expertise Locator and Social Q&A, with the ability to integrate expertise analytics into other business processes. Stay tuned for a webinar diving deeper into expertise solutions in the future. We also offer migration solutions for moving people and their content to IBM platforms, whether that is on-premises, in a private cloud, or in a public cloud. So let's look deeper into the 4 examples that are used in the adoption scenario that accelerate the engagement of IBM Connections. I'll show you IBM Connections Touchpoint that provides that guided user onboarding. IBM Connections Social Sidebar that provides the lightweight integration with other web applications. IBM Connections Invite that manages the process to invite and approve and register new internal and external users onto the platform. And the User Adoption Toolkit that provides the library of multimedia training elements that can be assembled into custom training plans. Switch first over to a live screen and let that come through first. Let's talk about Touchpoint, that onboarding experience. I'll log in as, let's say I'll log in as Gardner Rains here. And you can see that his login to Connections is intercepted. This is an optional configuration, but the idea here is that let's take newly provisioned users and route them through the Touchpoint experience to help them build their profile, build up their social network, and follow important people and places in the platform. You may need to configure certain social conduct guidelines, asking people to promise to be good citizens and attest to their acting appropriately. And if they accept those policies and guidelines, we can take them through the first page of the wizard. So the first step here shows a stripped-down version of the Connections profile, presenting just key information and attributes from the profile. You can see that some of the elements are non-editable, while some are editable, and we can provide the latest mobile number or whatever from Gardner here. So what we're looking to do here is complete the elements to fill out his social profile and make sure that we've captured those informative elements as well as maybe some expertise that Gardner has. A simple back and next navigational structure takes them through these wizard pages. On this next page, we see that the system has recommended a certain skill tag for Gardner. He may come up with additional tags that he wants to add to his profile. And the idea here is to build that information onto his profile and use it in the next screen to recommend people in the organization that he should invite to his network. So we'll see that based on the options presented here, he decides that Heather and Jasmine and Leo are probably folks he should connect with, and you can see that we're building up his social network with those people. In addition to defining social relationships with folks in the organization, Touchpoint provides further direction on people that are important to the organization. We call this promotions. So you can see here that the system has recommended that Gardner follow folks like Samantha and Frank in the organization. That continues to build up his list of followers. Now this is really important because this is recommendations that wouldn't normally happen for Gardner yet. He's new to the system. He hasn't contributed to Connections yet. He hasn't built that social network yet. So the common recommendation engines that we'd see within Connections, identifying people that he should connect with, this is all primed by the Touchpoint process. We can recommend both the people here and the places on this next screen that Gardner should be interacting with. So by the time he's gone through this Touchpoint process then, and is submitted and taken in then to the Connections environment, we find that we've solved the blanks, the white space problem, right? He's already following people, he's seeing what's happening in their activity streams, and he's getting then good recommendations for people and places to further engage with in Connections. So, IBM Connections Touchpoint, guided user onboarding, which is also then an extensible framework if we need to define additional interactive engagement patterns with people. Let's say that every year we need people to attest to those social conduct guidelines. We could have a touchpoint interception that on that anniversary date popped up those policies and procedures again and had people attest to them and then go on their way and interact with Connections. So anytime we need an engaging user experience to drive the actions within IBM Connections, that's Touchpoint. Let's talk next about IBM Connections Social Sidebar. I'm going to prime things just a little bit by logging in as Frank. And I'm going to remove a widget from an earlier bit. But let's say that Frank doesn't typically, he doesn't work day-to-day in Connections. Frank is maybe a marketing manager and he's out in the Greenwell intranet or extranet page, right, managing content, working with the business there. So the social sidebar is a plug-in to those other web applications, and you might see a little blue tab flashing in the background here. That's an attention indicator from the sidebar that something's happening within Frank's activity stream. So I've clicked on that tab, slid out the sidebar, and we see that we present some of the key functions from Connections injected onto the side of this web application. Frank can continue to look at the context of where he's working, but then interact with the Connections environment. So let's do a quick status post here. He's still working on Greenwell Sports. Live demo, you can tell because I'm misspelling things. As well as being able to do those status updates. He can have some key views of his activity stream, seeing what's happening with people he's following, or status updates in his network, on notifications and people that are mentioning him on entries. So he's able to monitor what's happening within the interactions of the Connections platform. We also provide some key links to Connections capabilities, in this case just the communities that Frank's involved in. So if there's something going on, he can quickly navigate into the community and Connections and take action from there. So the IBM Connections Social Sidebar, a lightweight integration component wired into any existing web application so that we're placing the Connections capabilities into the spots where people work. Let's talk next about IBM Connections Invite. We'll log in here as Frank again. So Frank has a means to collaborate with a partner and use the external user capabilities within Connections by. The invite asset then provides the workflow and management to invite, register those external users. So let's say, for example, that Frank wants to invite a guest. Similar to what we see in some of the other IBM deployments, whether it's the Greenhouse or Connections Cloud, a lot of you are going to be used to the simple invitation model. We're given a first name, a last name, an email address. That's all it takes to invite somebody in. Now we can wire that into certain conduct policies again and all that, and then invite the user to join us in the collaboration. In this case, I have chosen to invite a guest, so that would be an external user. You can see that we do some field validation, so if that one's somebody already invited, Frank doesn't have to invite them again. They're already registered with the system. Now, I would have received a message into mail inviting me in. For this demonstration environment, we have a very simple messaging template, but that can be extended with some nice styling, essentially saying that Frank has invited me, and my next step is to register. The registration process is, once again, a pretty easy bit in which the user will go through and complete just a few additional entries to determine what their login name and the password is going to be. Once again, agree to any policies that might apply and then register. Now, once registered, they'll get a confirmation email sent back again. This is a very simple messaging template, but we can pretty this up as needed. And that gives them then the credentials, confirming the credentials that they can log into the environment. Now, once logged in, Frank can go through and invite, let me just log back in here. Frank can then work with external users in their environment. And just 1 second here. I'm just going to set up this again. Frank logged out. There we go. So Frank's got a community in which he's enabled it to be restricted but allow external users to collaborate with him. So in this case, as he adds in another member, in this case Scott, you can see the clear indication that Scott's been registered. He's an external user, and he can be added in as such to the community. Frank would also be able to share files with the external users. So here's a file, and once again, clear indication that this file might be used with external people, and Frank can share that file with Scott again. So those sharing capabilities, once a user is registered, that's core capabilities of Connections. The piece that the invite asset provides is that invitation model, this action that we saw by Frank to invite a guest, that messaging interaction to alert the user that they've been invited, take them through the registration process, and then get them provisioned into the directory and a Connections profile generated for them. That's all handled by the invite asset. Fourth piece we'll talk about is then the multimedia libraries and user adoption toolkit for Connections. Here I am as Frank again. I'm going to log in, make sure that's fresh. And I'm going to remove this real quick so you can see the bit here. So one of the capabilities of the User Adoption Toolkit is the content of it. I mentioned before, it's video-based tutorials that either provide in-context descriptions of specific actions or are assembled into lesson plans. One of the ways that that content can be brought into Connections is through a widget. So in this case, I'm on the home page of Connections. I'll select from the palette of widgets that are available, select the multimedia library. You can see that adds into my page here. So now I have the catalog of these tutorials available to me. Let's say, for example, Frank was looking to create a blog entry and wanted to know how to add a video to a blog post. So the User Adoption Toolkit provides some simple instructions in text, but also a video tutorial that Frank can go through and watch the specific action being performed. This video is also narrated, and if I had the speaker up, you could hear things happening there. So Frank can watch that video and learn how to perform that specific action. Now that widget is also available in the other views. It may make sense to add it in to the palette here in some of the other views that he uses within Connections and have that same capability again. So that's the contents of the library of tutorials. But let's talk a little bit more, or let's talk some about what makes it the User Adoption Toolkit. So on the bottom here, you see in the overall library, that's those video-based tutorials and those small instruction sets. And it's there that they've been organized into different lesson plans and courses. What makes the Adoption Toolkit, though, is the providing templates to corporate communications or training practitioners to assemble training migration aids or support aids or user productivity aids. So you can see here some examples that you might reassemble the library content to create knowledge-based articles or to create tips and tricks in newsletters that go out. These are all work products that have been templated to be used. Let's look at a quick example. Let's maybe you created a presentation, a training guide. So the User Adoption Toolkit gives you a template in which it shows in your presentation how would you embed the links so that the videos would play as you're talking about the topics in your training plan. So each of these links then, and there's a convention of how to insert the link into your presentation so that the video plays. Also, you can, let's say, have a quick reference guide. Maybe you constructed a little spreadsheet that is sent out to users, giving them quick information on key capabilities in Connections. And once again, the template provides the information of how to embed the video links within it so they can play the video associated with that link. So I showed you those four elements, right? Touchpoint for guided onboarding, social sidebar for lightweight integration, Invite for engaging internal and external users, and the user adoption toolkit for assembling those training materials. I'm going to skip through, and you'll see in the presentation some more details on each of those items, including some screenshots and where to find further information. Now, these four items were part of the overall social business applications catalog that I mentioned. We also have an external community on IBM.com. Link is in the slide here, that you'll find this overview presentation as well as specific information on each of the applications in the catalog. So now I think it's a good time. We can open up for some questions over the phone lines. I think, Karen, you might have some poll questions for us as well. So as we collect and queue up that information, let's see if there's any questions in the web chat or do the polls.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott and Amber. We're hoping we can open the lines for some Q&A. And as Scott mentioned, I'll start posting some poll questions that we're hoping anybody on the call might be able to answer to let us know how we're doing.
So as we collect and do the poll and look at some of the other questions, let me just reiterate what we're seeing here, right? And then I'm reacting to just less than half of us in the call today, not being an IBM Connections customer. So let me differentiate just a little bit between what we saw in terms of IBM Connections as that social platform, right, providing communities of practice and special services around file sharing and personnel profiling, activity management, and the like, core features and capabilities of the Connections product. What we see with the social business apps then is that we have extended those capabilities with these assets that provide additional ways to drive that adoption of the IBM Connections platform. So in the case of Touchpoint, right, we've got the profiling capability in Connections, but the Touchpoint apps provides that guided interface to have people fill out their profiles and invite people to their social network and engage in communities. So the programs are offered by the IBM Software Services team. They are acquired through a software services engagement, a project, if you will. Those projects then provide for the asset and the deployment services in most cases to get it up and running in your environment. There's base levels of the services that configure the capabilities as is, but as I mentioned at the very beginning, we can always extend these to meet specific customer needs. We've got that flexibility, we've got that capability, and all that can be wrapped into then a services project to make that to work for yourself.
Thank you, Scott. And Amber, anything queued up on the phone?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. We have one question on queue. Our first question is for a participant named Paul. Sir, your line is now open.
Yeah, hi. You began to answer my question there when you were talking about how these services are purchased. It sounds like you get into a software services project. Is there a standard price for the offerings that's published, or is everything basically very custom based on the size of the end customer?
Yeah, we have some benchmark, I would say, or some default bits for vanilla pieces. Although we find that we're usually incorporating one or more of these application assets into a deployment engagement. So let's say a customer is contracted with the services team to help in the deployment of connections. So in this case, it's very easy to add one of these apps into that deployment project. I'll tell you quite frankly, sometimes at no cost, no additional cost. So in that case, there might not be any set fees. Standalone, these are usually engagements that happen very quickly. There's usually it's measured in a couple of days to deploy, and then maybe do some styling, some configuration to match specific needs. But these are very short-term services engagement. Typically offered as a bit of a fixed fee, if you will. And what we do then is, without quoting specific prices here, because we might have, we do have a worldwide audience to normalize into local currency and to local bits. We would have you contact your local software services representative, and then they can provide a quote.
Are these services only offered by IBM, or can a business partner get access to these in some way and kind of resell them, if you will?
Yeah, we are looking to expand the program to allow partners to resell. Currently, we're pursuing that with a couple primary partners, early partners in this. I would say if there are business partners on the call here, contact me directly, and we'll talk more about candidacy for such a program. So this is something as well that if business partners have offerings around connections, we can include the apps in those offerings as well.
All right, thanks.
I'm going to take just a few moments just to orient the participants to what's happening in some of these other applications that are available. So direct messaging, as you might imagine, is the ability to have one-to-one private exchanges between connections participants. Typically in a social environment, I make a status update. I want everybody in my network or everyone that's following me to see it. But there are times when a little private communication, still within the context of maybe a discussion thread that's happening, makes sense. Direct messaging is a component we can add into the Connections environment to make that happen. The three Connections accelerators you see at the bottom, Collaboration Services 4, are three partnering arrangements we have with Time to Act with their Web Content Management extension for Connections. We call that XCC, or they call that XCC. So Time to Act XCC provides structured pages in content presentation of Connections materials in landing pages and whatnot. So it's a way to provide a structured top-down presentation of information to complement the sort of grassroots, bottoms-up social contributions that you see in Connections. So that's Time to Act XCC, and we bring that together as part of a services project to deploy into a Connections environment. Trilog Group has their Project Zec product that provides social project management integrated with Connections. So if you are a organization that does a lot of project management, needing things that go beyond, quite frankly, the activity management that we see in the core Connection, if we have assigned tasks with time tracking that we need to organize into schedules and assign resources to, the types of things that we use project management software for, then Project Zec is a piece that provides all that capability and some really advanced capability, but in an online collaborative framework of Connections. So all of the project participants can update their own hours tracked and percent completes and status on their projects. And you see then that can be rolled up into portfolio management as well as socially shared within Connections. So now on a specific project task, I can link directly to the file that shows the document, maybe the task was to create a document. So we have all of that direct linkage from the project management tasks to the actual project work products and other discussion around them. Hype innovation are really the kings, if you will, in ideation management. We have an integration component for Connections. So if you need to go beyond the ideation blogs that are available within Connections and have a full innovation campaign where we set key performance indicators, key objectives, solicit ideas, and work those through, the Hype Innovation app provides that expression of that campaign, the management of that campaign in the Connections environment. I had mentioned before a little bit about expertise solutions. We have a full 360-degree view of that. We're really promoting just those two use cases in terms of named items, which is expertise locator, quickly find an expert based on a topic, not just because there happens to be a tag in their profile. That might be a small indicator of expertise, but really use their contributions into the entire organization and the interactions they have with people to identify, to certify them as experts in that area. So expertise locator is a quickly find someone with that topic of expertise. Social Q&A is a question and answer pattern around that. I may not know who to ask or where to ask my question, but I've just got a question. So let me pose it and then have the expertise analytics route that to the proper people and places to get the answer. And then finally, the content migration factory is when we need to move content from source systems, maybe outside of IBM, into IBM platforms, namely Connections, maybe web content management. The migration factory approach is a structured extract, transform, and load facility that allows us to take the content from the source system, run transformations on it to make it acceptable for ingestion into the target system. And we do that a lot with customers that want to move from Jive to Connections Cloud, SharePoint to Connections, that sort of thing. Thank you, everybody, for letting me fill the gap with an overview of some of those other things. Like I said, we'll probably be looking at the next webinar to be in the expertise space.
Okay, and I was seeing this question from Adrian in the chat, but it looks like Michael might have just answered it. Scott, Adrian was asking, saying, I'm interested in the project exec portion. Where can I find more information about it? And can I try it out as a test?
Right. So certainly either the links for our specific offering around that is in this external community, the ISSC community, on IBM.com, as well as a direct link to Trilog Group. So that's www.triloggroup.com, and you'll find that there at their site.
Great, and that's what Michael just shared, so that's good. And let me see, there was something else up here. One moment. As a follow-up on that, Adrian said, let's see, can the project exec import tasks/projects from any project tracking tool like MS Project, etc.?
Certainly does, and that's a very common pattern we see with project exec, right? And this is really the meat of what we're getting at here. What happens today, right? A project manager has a Microsoft project file in which we're tracking the tasks and the resources assigned, and they spend 80% of their time tracking down from the people what's the update. Now they could try to get their update by having the person, edit the file, send it back to them, or use Microsoft Project Online, which is kind of an inferior user interface, honestly. But that seldom happens. Usually it's email exchanges or something like that to get the status update. So the project manager is spending 8% of their time on the administrative activities of just updating that Gantt chart, updating the status. So by providing it within a collaborative community with all the participants able to update their own tasks without needing client software on their machine, that switches it around, right? 20% managing the updates to the project and 80% actually managing the project. That's really what it's providing. So the simple pattern there is they may have constructed the initial project plan using Microsoft Project or some other bit that can be imported into Project Exec and made available then to all the participants in the project.
And we do have a question in the chat, but we're going to see if we can get a little bit more elaboration. We'll see. Kevin Smith was asking, can you discuss integration with external apps like CRM or legacy notes NSFs? And Amy has asked him to see if he might elaborate a little bit or ask the question verbally.
Our question will be coming from Kevin. Sir, your line is now open.
Okay, great. I'm just following up on the question left in the chat. But you see a lot of clients, smaller clients, mid-size, where the profile searching and expertise location is not as relevant to them as having everything in one place is. And the questions there become, how do I surface my CRM application? How do I surface my legacy notes applications? How do I bring these other items in and act on them? And is this worthy of adoption issues? It seems to be with some of the smaller ones anyway.
Yeah, let's take one of those aspects, Kevin. What are you thinking then by when you say bring in the notes applications?
Client has a number of legacy apps that have a lot of documentation, and we could migrate that data into like a document library, but these tend to have a little bit of workflow around them.
Yeah, so we've seen a few patterns. We are seeing some customers that are looking to migrate maybe that static document library that was in Domino or a discussion database that was in Domino, and now as they adopt Connections, they see that it makes more sense to bring that document library from Domino into Connections, either through Files or Connections Content Manager or something, where what was a document library in Domino becomes a community with a set of community files in Connections. That IBM Content Migration Factory is the tooling that we use for such migration. Now you also mentioned in the opposite case, right? It's the Domino application is still in use and viable and is used for the workflow of maybe approving documents or as a custom application. In that case, we'd probably want to consult with around that scenario to say, well, does it make sense to still keep in Domino and use that? Would Connections Content Manager, which is the document management capabilities within Connections, service those needs? I think we get into then discussing that retain and integrate, or if it's also a migration pattern. Can go either way on that.
One more question from Adrian. Sir, your line is now open.
The one problem that we are facing is, first of all, in this Project Exec tool, can this also import information about the current activities? I think you mentioned somehow things about activities and to-dos. Can this import of current activities? And the second problem we are facing is that we have information scattered among different communities on the IBM W3 website in general, the collaboration communities, and many of them relate to the same subject. We would like to kind of do something to get them together or tailor them in a better formatted way. But it's extremely difficult to go and look what is out there. Is there any analytics that could be used there, or is there any of these tools that would help in doing that, just pulling together information from a very, very different variety of communities, files, wikis, you name it?
Yeah. Okay. So the first part of that around Project Zec. So Project Zec, you would import, project tasks and activities from Microsoft projects. That's the most common things, or from some of the other client software that does scheduling and resource tracking. So if you had a Microsoft project file, which you started with your project, you can import that into Project Zec and use it from there. Or you can create things directly in Project Zec. There is not, it's not that it takes the activities and to-dos from Connections and wraps Project Manager around it. It's more of a separated capability there for Project Zec. Now, in terms of bringing together information from different communities, one approach you could take for that is to use Time to Act XCC. And let me go a little bit off script here, and just let's see if I can get a little bit of example shown here. So let's say, for example, I had content from on a particular topic. Let's say, for this example, human resources. This is great. We're going off script level. So here we are, things about human resources. Well, the content that's presented here, we see I have different navigational structures that lead to a set of managed pages, if you will. And on that page, then I have widgets presenting information from Connections. Maybe this news article is a blog entry. This policy and procedures is a wiki page. These aren't necessarily from the same community, right? This is an assembly of content, whether it's specific content or the latest articles from one or more different communities. So this is a way to provide across that rich content that's in Connections, a structured presentation of it. And this is an approach that customers can take so that departmental entities, like let's say this human resources example, can reassemble the content and present it from what might be multiple communities in the organization that happen to have human resources content within it.
Okay, I missed how did you do it?
Oh, so in this case, it's done with Time to Act XCC. And the services work to configure it. I think if we've got, you may have an internal to IBM question, in which case get with me offline and I can tell you more of some of the things we're doing with tonight.
Okay, it's XCC. Okay, it's for internal IBM.
That's great. Yeah, so Time to Act XCC is the solution set that I showed you in that screen example.
Thank you.
Awesome. But I'm going to leave you with a little mnemonic, and right. I don't have them on the screen in the right order. But if you think Social Sidebar starts with S, User Adoption Toolkit starts with U, Invite starts with I, and Touchpoint starts with T. That spells S-U-I-T. So suit is an easy word to remember to the 4 social business applications that help drive adoption. So whether that's Suit Up for Adoption or Adoption Suits Me, I don't know how you might want to use it, but that's a silly little mnemonic that you can take with you to help remember those 4 items I talked about today.
Very good. I like mnemonic devices. They're very handy. And thank you for posting that in the chat, Amy, to help remind folks. Okay, so with that, I would like to thank Scott and all of our panelists, Amy and Michael, for their time today, and Scott for that great presentation and demo. It's much appreciated. And a reminder that within the next few days, a recording of this event will be attached to TechNote number 704-5503, and I have pasted that in the web chat a couple of times. There's a link there, and I also just pasted a link in the chat to our IBM Software Services for Collaboration blog, because in there you'll get heads up about sessions like this and just general information, so that's good to follow. And then the big, I'll put it in there one more time, the link to the Social Business Applications wiki pages out on the ISSC community, and that's where it has the details about all of these apps and customer-ready materials. So I think that's it for us. So thank you all for joining this session, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.